Hello, and welcome to the Tapcast podcast. Today's guest is someone who has not only shaped how we grow and consume food, but is also redefined the future of agriculture as we know it, is a leading name in the vertical farming market. We have Marc Oshima, who is the CEO of Babylon Micro Farms, where he's leading the charge in making fresh, nutritious produce more accessible to communities around the world. A brief introduction about Mark. He's a mission driven C suite leader with over 30 years of experience. Mark is widely recognized as one of the most innovative minds in the food and agriculture space. From marketing and commercialization to advocacy and impact, Mark brings a wealth of insight, heart, and strategy to everything he does. So, Mark, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the episode today. Welcome. How do you feel? How do you feel being a part of this activity with us?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And what a warm welcome. It's exciting because, again, you guys are going into your sixth annual. It's just reinforcing the idea that there's a bigger movement happening here. And I think this is exciting in terms of the overall industry. There's a lot of different discussions in terms of what's been happening, but fundamentally, there's been a lot of good progress. And I think that the fact that you guys are doing this for the sixth time in the region really highlights the need and the
Right.
opportunity.
Absolutely, you're absolutely correct on that, Mark. And to have somebody like you who's had years of experience in this particular field is also exceptional for us because we want to highlight and we want to bring out those unspoken insights that people are still not aware of and the kind of importance that we're also trying to flag through the sixth edition of this event. So, Mark, let's dive right into it. You have been a pioneering force in the vertical farming industry, as my introduction also reflected. So, from co-founding Aero Farms to now leading Babylon Micro Farms, how has your perspective on food systems transformation evolved across these journeys?
Yeah, it fundamentally goes back to, what is the problem and what are the needs? And so, we think about the macro pressures in terms of climate change, drought, access to food, food security. These issues have just heightened. And so without question, we need more solutions. And vertical farming has been part of that, I think, in terms of helping pave the way, helping inspire and think about different ways of growing, how to be more judicious with our resources, how to grow with more, with less. And so I think this is fundamental when you think about any industry, and the evolving aspect of it is what can you uniquely solve? And there's different applications at Aero Farms around large scale commercial applications to what we're doing today with Babylon Microfarms, which is actually bringing the farm right to the customer and creating that immediate connection with the food and how it's grown and really reinforcing this hyper-local proposition. But what we're trying to say, ultimately is help engage the community in thinking about we have to do more with less. And again, not only what we can do within vertical farming, but what we can do within high-tech greenhouses, what we can do even in the traditional field farming. This is a way that innovation and technology can be an enabler.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. And as you mentioned, Babylon is reshaping the idea of hyperlocal food production today. You're trying to bring farms into different scenarios. So, why do you think this kind of a decentralization is becoming increasingly critical in the vertical farming movement today?
It's about driving that immediacy, and the bigger I think COVID, as we all know, put a big spotlight on the fragility of our supply chain and appreciating, how complex the food supply chain is, and thinking about, typically where your food is grown is not where the food is consumed. And so there's a lot of waste, that happens along that value chain. And I think this idea of enabling on-site farming is about making that immediate connection, again, with that freshness, with the product and the product offering. And so I think it's an important element. We also view this as very complementary, though. We don't think we're feeding the masses, but we hope we are inspiring the masses with the work we're doing. And so I think that's an important, distinction in terms of, how we think about the business and what the opportunities are ahead of us.
Great. And Mark, with your journey and experience so far, has there been a particular market gap that you think you have accepted as a challenge and is now been addressed to really well now that you have accomplished the kind of addressing that this industry needs?
Well, the gap is, and what we've seen is, making sure you have the right business and business model, right? So technology or this idea of indoor vertical farming, these are enablers, right? But fundamentally, going back to what problem are you solving, and then do you have the right business model? Do you have the right economics? And with what we're doing with Babylon Microfarms, we make margin on selling the farm, but we also make even more margin on selling a subscription. So the idea of ongoing, continued relationship that we have with the customer. So we've developed a technology platform that allows us to be able to remotely monitor, hundreds of different farms around the world. Today, we operate in 5 different countries. To give you a sense, we're working on our ninth generation, of our technology. So we've had a lot of lessons learned in terms of, again, how do we commercialize this? How do we make them turnkey? We have these even going on cruise ships going around the world to give you a sense of how autonomous the process is.
Right.
And what we're doing is, enabling anyone to have that green thumb. And so we have a guided growing app that takes the user through exactly each of the different steps of growing and making that connection. And so, the gap here has been, again, how do we successfully scale? How do we successfully have the right economics? And how do we then successfully have the right client successes? And so today, when we talk about our customers, we're working with all the major food management companies. We're across many different verticals, but we are particularly focused on 4 key areas. So we talk about hospitality, education, we talk about healthcare, and then we talk about corporate dining. And we're working with literally the marquee, companies in the world. Healthcare, for example, we're in Mayo's Clinic and expanding multiple locations.
Hmm.
Hospitality, we're in the Marriott, JW Marriott, Marriott Marquis. I mean, this is high profile, Lowe's Hotels. Education, top universities,
Right.
really at the forefront of driving sustainability and dining. And then we think about, areas around, corporate dining, we're at the World Bank, we're at LinkedIn offices. And then, within the world, we have amazing integrations. We have farms at the U.S. Olympic Training Center feeding and
Right.
nourishing our top athletes around performance. So our ability to touch and influence a wide community is exciting for us, and we think about how we're scaling the business.
No, absolutely. I think that was really interesting, and how you're tapping into all of these crucial industries that are today on top of their games when it comes to their association with food and also feeding the masses, as you mentioned. So, but still, there is a lack of understanding, as we also, with every new edition of the Global Vertical Farming Show, we have addressed this idea that, with the ongoing various volatilities, be it referring to climate, be it referring to scarcities of water or land and supply chain vulnerabilities, there is still a lack of understanding the kind of real impact that vertical farming really have on food security, particularly in remote regions or maybe arid regions such as the Middle East. Therefore, Middle East being one of our focused areas for this particular event. So, how would you like address an understanding of this?
Yeah, well, it's about sharing success stories, right? And using platforms like this and your show to be able to bring together, the thought leaders and be able to demonstrate, the viability and the health. There's a really strong, commitment that we have in terms of, again, being able to demonstrate, what we're doing and how we're doing it. And so I think that level of transparency and be able to share is really important in terms of, again, how do we build more awareness? I think it's about broader stakeholder engagement, though. So I think, you had highlighted a few things that I'm extremely proud of is not only building companies, but building industry. And so
Mm,
I've been the board chair for the CA Alliance. So that's
mm,
something in terms of representing not only indoor vertical farms, but also high-tech greenhouses. So thinking about indoor growing and the value propositions that are there. So partnering with multiple stakeholders, I think, is really essential in terms of we think about, again, how do we expand? I shared some of the clients and some of the stories. These are amazing, case studies about, what kind of integration can happen and
mm.
the success there. So those are the opportunities that we continue to look for in terms of, again, how can we help, amplify that?
Right. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that was exactly my question as well. That, if I were to ask you to identify some of the biggest growth opportunities in the vertical farming sector right now, because, there have been a lot of innovative startups who are trying to bring tech-based breakthroughs such as automation or AI-led monitoring. So how do you think that is panning out in the industry today?
Well, I think that it's trying to understand how to be able to support initiatives like that, both from an investment standpoint, R&D standpoint, but then ultimately a commercialization standpoint, right? It's got to come all together. And I think, because this is in many respects still an emerging industry, there's a level of investment. And that's where I think there's been a lot of focus in terms of the amount of dollars that have flowed in from that aspect. And, we have to remember, I mean, this is writing a new playbook in agriculture. And so we need, to think differently. We need to think about how we can advance. I think part of this is trying to understand, though, what we can leverage, though, from other industries. We don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel either. And so it's about how we can partner and collaborate with the broader industry to come up with the right solutions. And I think that's a big part of, I think about when we think about the opportunities ahead is how do we work together and come up with collective solutions here.
Right. And exactly, I think that is a nice concept note that you've shared with us. But if I were to ask you that, has there been a particular innovation that you believe is really pushing the industry towards its next major leap now? Because as you mentioned, the industry is still growing. So according to your opinion, is there a particular innovation that you're really fond of at Babylon?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think in terms of the secret sauce, if you will, for Babylon, and I think that when you think about different organization is really around the integration, right? And
Hmm.
so it's not to develop, one element. It's about how to think holistically. How does this work together? So we
Hmm.
have a hardware solution, but it's meaningless unless we have a software solution.
Hmm.
And that hardware software is meaningless unless we have a horticulture solution. And then that's meaningless unless we have a customer solution. So
Right.
our history, we've been at this since 2017. We have the history of working with our clients and commercializing that. So I think that's a huge area that is not easy to replicate in terms of, again, how do you be able to advance, the industry is bringing that knowledge and expertise together.
Right.
But there's tools without question in terms of, the impact of AI and how we can be able to synthesize data in a much more systematic way. So I think that's really a key unlock, and we're seeing that rapidly accelerating in terms of, again, our insights around how do we optimize performance.
Right. So another like addition question to this, I don't know if it is something that would be a little tricky, but how can we ensure that vertical farming doesn't become an elite technology, but rather serves a wider population? I mean, if I were to ask you, how is Babylon approaching the kind of affordability that the industry needs to serve? And in with that, scalability also increases when the approach is much affordable.
Sure. Yeah, well, it's first and foremost is around making sure you define what your value proposition is, right? And so this idea of creating this connection with your food, inspiring people around your food, where it's coming from, is so meaningful. And so it's understanding, again, what can you deliver and how do you deliver against that? But to be clear, our solutions and what we're deploying is not just at that luxury hotel, it's also at the public school system, right?
Right.
And so we're extremely excited and proud in terms of that impact that we have and the breadth of customers that we have and how we think about making that accessible. It's accessible from a price point, it's accessible from an operation standpoint, it's accessible from an implementation. These are very turnkey, simply plug it in and you're good to go. So it's um, those are all really critical, though, when we think about, how do you scale the business effectively and
Mm.
efficiently?
Exactly. But do you think there have been some challenges that are actually holding the vertical farming industry back? And if yes, then how do you think the industry as a wholesome place respond to such challenges?
Well, the challenges are unfortunately when, you see some of the headline news. I think that's headline news around certain companies maybe having some financial troubles or issues. That tends to dominate, and then everything kind of maybe gets lumped together. But I think what's important is to understand there's different reasons for different organizations and different moments in time. Could be the right solution, just not the right time. And so I think it's important to be able to discern, between that. And so I think that's important. Again, goes back to education, communication. Again,
Right.
thinking about, how do we articulate that story in the right way. So that's why coalition building, alliance building, events and partners like yourself are important for us to be able to help cut through some of that noise that tends to dominate. Part of it is sharing success stories. Again, do we have the right business model? Are we expanding? One of the things that we're excited about is that we have definitely been in expansion mode. We're just recognized by Inc. 5000 as one of the fastest growing private companies. And so, again, we're demonstrating right behind that the business is working.
No, absolutely. I think that's a shining moment. And also, you correctly mentioned that the role for stronger government or institutional support is really relevant when we're trying to mitigate challenges in an industry like the vertical farming. So, what are there any policy level changes that you think can also unlock the next phase of this growth?
So without question, we think about support that government can play and partnership can play, right? So I think the role of private and public partnerships are critical when we think about
Mm,
accelerating any kind of movement, right? And so there's the old maxim, you can do more together, right? And so that kind of alignment, that kind of work is going to be meaningful. I think for us as well, what's exciting because we are operating on a global basis, we see that opportunity and moments of acceleration or paths to acceleration with certain governments even being faster. And so, there can be different stakeholder engagement that can help accelerate this even further.
great. And so I'm also really excited to know from you, Mark, what was the driving factor that brought you particularly to this industry? I mean, what was that factor that, intrigued you that you will now want to be a part of this booming industry of the vertical farming?
Well, I have a really in-depth background in food and retail. I've headed the marketing for supermarket chains and specialty food retailers and restaurants. And so always have had a deep connection with food, but was seeing firsthand people's interest in their food. Where is it coming from? Where is it sourced? And then ultimately, how is it grown? And that's what got me excited in thinking about what role technology can play. What role can developing a mission-driven organization play in terms of thinking about, again, how do we drive these breakthroughs? And so what I've been most passionate about is thinking about from a food system standpoint, again, how do we advance? How do we make changes? And then how do we work together to really be able to amplify that work?
Great. And so my final question to you, Mark, looking 10 to 15 years ahead, because we have to be futuristic, of course, we are living in the Gen Z world. So how do you envision vertical farming's role in everyday life, from schools and homes to cities and humanitarian efforts?
Well, we have a chance, and particularly the work at Babylon, is to be able to have an influence in each one of those areas. And so we see a greater awareness and appreciation of, again, your food and where it's coming from, and then ultimately how is it grown, right? And so I think there's going to be even more acute pressure in terms of environmental factors. Our traditional growing regions are going to be more challenged than ever before as we think about some of the different pressures that we see there. And so we need technology. We need to think about how that inspires different solutions. And again, it's not just about the means of production, but again, how can we help foster more innovation that then can
Mhm.
transfer to the broader food system as well? So we see just a much more engaged community because it's going to be out of necessity.
Exactly. And that is exactly what we are also trying to advocate through the Global Vertical Farming Show platform. We are advocating that it is really important to adapt to these newer technologies in order to facilitate the idea of global food security as well as sustainability being one of the top priorities in today's world and the food sector. So thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for your time with us today, Mark. It was a really great conversation. You've highlighted important facts for us, in fact important ideas that it is absolutely important to bring out success stories. Without that, it is a little difficult to understand the depth and importance of a particular project or advocacy campaign. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity and thank you very much.